Today you're going to see an attempt to set a world record for the most threshing machines running at the same time. The driving force behind this event was Ken Mack of Langenburg, Saskatchewan, who has been organizing threshing bees for a number of years. Before even thinking about setting a world record back in 2010, he decided it would be fun to have 10 threshing machines running at one location. The sight of all these machines running at the same time was so impressive to everyone else, but Mack still wasn't satisfied.
Well, it started with one machine, and then the following year I had two machines, and it got sort of really exciting seeing all that stuff going into motion, and it got sort of being an addiction, and I couldn't resist in having more and more.
When Mack heard the previous record was 29 threshing machines running at once, accomplished in Rock River, Wisconsin several years ago, he decided to try and break it here at Langenburg. He called the event the Old Tyme Harvest for Hunger to raise money for the hungry at the same time. After his previous experience with 10 threshing machines, he knew this project was going to require lots of work.
And then I promised my wife I'd get out of the threshing machine hobby, and I sold 4 of them, and they seemed like they grew again, and I got some more back. And so I had to fix some more up the last 3-4 weeks here to get them running again.
Of course, judges were on hand for the big day, which is required if you're going to set an official world record. Once all the equipment was ready to go, Mack came up with a very meaningful signal for the threshing to start.
It's my dear friend from Ebenezer, and he's in failing, his health is failing. I'm going to go there and I'm going to get on his machine, and when they give me the signal, I'm going to raise the Canadian flag to wave it, and we're going to blow the whistle on the steam engine for the threshing to begin.
The final count gave them a total of 41 threshing machines running at the same time, which means this event reached its goal and achieved a new record at the time of our visit in the summer of 2013. The estimated attendance was about 6,500 people, all of whom appear to be thoroughly enjoying themselves. The threshing machines and the tractors used to run them came from across a large portion of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Mack once again did more than his share, providing 11 of the threshing machines.
Oh, I got John Deere's, McCormick's Case, Dion, Red River Special, and it doesn't matter as long as it's got 4 wheels and a cylinder in it, I can fix it.
Some families decided to turn this day into a fun outing, including the Richard Wellman family from Russell, just over the border in Manitoba. Their contributions included a McCormick Deering threshing machine powered by a 1918 2040 Minneapolis tractor, along with a set of very visible Team Wellman family T-shirts. It's support like this that makes Mack especially glad they chose to utilize the event to raise money to feed world hunger.
I was at home, and my friend that was running my binder said that they might have to leave it there because the crop was so thick they can't get the binder out of the middle of the field. So, and I thought that abundance had struck a nerve of what we're so fortunate up in North America to have all this food, and overseas they haven't got anything like that.
They chose to work with the Canadian Foodgrains Bank in their fundraising, an organization which helps the hungry all over the world.
They were out last fall and talked to me about this, and it sort of struck a nerve with me about how some of these people are eating overseas and basically eating leaves and sticks or branches and cooking that up for supper for the family and the kids.
In planning for an event of this size, Mack quickly realized he would not be able to handle it alone. The 40 acres used to put on the show was donated by the Eberhard family of Langenburg. These acres were seeded with wheat to be harvested for this event, but unfortunately the crop didn't germinate. Like true farmers, the Eberhards were happy they could still help out.
I've known them all my life, but the thing is, I used to, when I thrashed out at my farmstead, that's where I got my grain from a lot of the years. They give me a plot of grain, and I'd binder it, and then I'd give it back to them again. We had some grain to thresh because I don't have any grain up here to do it. So that's how my connection, and it just grew from there.
The actual stooks for this event came from a winter wheat crop from nearby Churchbridge, simply because that crop was ready in time for this late August event. Mack told us he's deeply grateful for all the help he received from everyone in Langenburg and the surrounding area.
I started working on this a couple of years ago. After my show that was done in 2010, I couldn't get this out of my mind. I just thought I had to get this big record, and I just kept working on it and talking to people, and they finally decided to go with me on this, and we got her done.
In addition to the excitement of pursuing and achieving the world record for the most threshing machines running at one time, Mack says this unprecedented event also turned into a large celebration of her agricultural heritage. Reaching this goal required dedicated volunteers to bring in threshing machines and equipment from the surrounding area, including Ted Stremel of Elkhorn, Manitoba, who supplied a rare threshing machine which has its own engine.
It's between 1912 and 1920 that I know of, and it's a new advance made by Bell City Threshing Company in Bell City, Iowa.
Okay.
And I think Bell City turned into International Harvester, I think.
The threshing machine has a 20-inch cylinder, so it was one of the smaller units at the show. The grain has to be fed into it by hand, which probably led to a few lost fingers back when these units were commonly used on the prairies. But having its own engine meant farmers didn't need to supply an outside power source.
Back then, probably, a farmer might have 60 acres of crop, so this fellow might have this thresher, and he might take it to 2 or 3 farms in the fall, and then they'd stack it, they could thrash it in the wintertime too.
The one-cylinder Titan engine on the threshing machine produces 10 horsepower and was built by International. They run it on gas but add a little water to keep it from pinging, just like farmers did in the old days. Like most old equipment, they had to do some work to get things running smoothly. On this day, the return elevator was giving them some trouble.
We were throwing the belt all the time. We got that sorted out, and then the belt broke. We broke 2 belts before we got going. We had to shorten one, and the other one is just too short now. And we had to adjust the pulley so it run true.
If you've ever been to a threshing bee, chances are the threshing machines will have a blower to handle the straw after the grain has been threshed out. But this threshing machine was built before blowers became available.
This has got a carrier on the back, carries the straw out to the back, and then they used to have a team of horses on a rope, one on each side. They'd thrash a pile, and then the team would pull the pile away and maybe pull it over to a stack, and guys would stack that.
As far as Stremel knows, this new advanced threshing machine was originally bought and used in the Elkhorn area. Getting it running and bringing it here was a fair bit of work, but he was thrilled to take part in this historic event and help set a new world record. If you are of the opinion that only people past a certain age get involved in this kind of threshing event, then you are sadly mistaken. 11-year-old Taylor Strudwick of Belgony, Saskatchewan, is here helping out his cousins, 14-year-old Alex Kirby, and his 17-year-old brother John from Spy Hill. The Kirby brothers brought along their 1950s vintage Red River Special threshing machine and the 1952 Farmall M tractor, which is running it.
I own the tractor there. It's used on the farm quite regularly. Makes all the square bales, runs a 24-foot swath that cuts a little hay. And I did the mechanical part. I rebuilt the number 2 straw walker and the thrashing machine. That was quite a job.
I also helped them fix the straw walker, and I figured out how to put the belts on and stuff like that.
The Red River Special threshing machine is owned by Alex, making this threshing bee a joint venture between the 2 Kirby brothers.
And I found it on the internet just looking at Red Rivers, and I stumbled across it, and I ended up buying it for $1,000, and he wanted $1,800 for it or something like that.
Both brothers were quite excited about being a part of the world threshing record. John even compared it to winning a hockey tournament for typical Canadian teenagers. Alex says he wanted to be involved in this event ever since he first heard of it.
I started looking for a thrashing machine years ago and finally found one, and then John was like, my dad was like, oh, you gotta include your brother, so I had to let him use his tractor instead of mine.
The boys were hoping to run the tractor and threshing machine by themselves for this event, but for insurance purposes, they had to have adult supervision. They include their grandpa, Earl Kitts, and their father's stepfather, Murray Pottinger, who is a grandpa to the boys. But John still likes to come up with his own ideas.
First time we ran it for the World Book of Records, we had to tighten up. There was some thrashing out all the heads. And he told me not to, but I tightened up the concave here a little bit.
Okay.
And we got a lot more grain.
John told us they quickly learned that feeding grain into these old threshing machines has to be done with a lot more patience than when you're driving a modern combine with all the latest features.
Yeah, well, what happens is I throw one in and then one will get hung up or something, get thrown in sideways, gets hung up, and then they go in together, and then it grinds away, and luckily we didn't plug it.
John was quick to point out that his Farmall M is much better equipped to run this threshing machine than that well-known make of green tractors.
The John Deere's have the steel pulleys. It's got a wood pulley. It grips better. If that was a steel pulley, it probably would have slid off, and then we would have had to pull her all apart, and that would have been fun.
Both brothers have become avid collectors of antique farm equipment, but Alex knows that he will have to work by himself at least some of the time because he's not a real big fan of the international equipment.
Well, Dad's more helped me when I started getting interested in it. And then he's kind of like, okay, just do it yourself. And then I just work on it myself, on my tractors and stuff. My brother doesn't like most of my kinds of tractors, so I end up working on them alone.
Even though they're still very young, the Kirby brothers have already built up a reliable network of part sources for their antique farm equipment.
It's not too hard to find parts. We got one wrecker that he's got a graveyard of cases and stuff. And I know lots of my uncles have old tractors parked and stuff that will have them.
The main goal of this event was to set a world threshing record, but it's also a celebration of agriculture's past and future. The future appears to be in good hands since Alex and John Kirby plan to farm together full-time when they get older. Well, as you've already seen on today's program, the Old Tyme Harvest for Hunger in Langenburg, Saskatchewan in August of 2013 broke the previous world record for the most threshing machines operating at the same time, with a total of 41. Earlier, you met Ken Mack, who was the driving force behind this wildly successful event. But Mack was smart enough to recruit many talented and hardworking people for help in this project, including Warren Kaeding of nearby Churchbridge, who is one of the directors.
We had a bunch of young people that thought, you know what, let's make this a community event. And then it kind of mushroomed when we started looking for volunteers, and we got volunteers from communities all around, from communities in Manitoba, and we made it an interprovincial event.
To put on a threshing event of this size, they had to put up about 1,600 sheaves of grain. This required 3 binders to do the actual cutting and about 50 people doing the hard work of putting up the sheaves. Of course, that included several old-timers who made sure the younger folks knew how to do the job right.
It was to be done this way, and and this is the correct way, and leave the hole for the rabbit to go through, and how 6 was better than 5, or 8 was too many, and So yes, we were all schooled as to how sheaves were to be done. And then a week later we had to load the wagons. And the 85-year-old guy said, "We'll stook, but we ain't loading wagons." So where are we going to get guys to load wagons? Well, all of a sudden we had 20 young guys that came out of nowhere, had no experience loading wagons. We'll do it. And within 2 hours, they were loaded and heading down the highway.
When we asked Kaeding to estimate the number of people who helped make this event happen, there was lots of figuring involved. But the volunteer support was strong enough to get all the jobs done.
We felt we had anywhere from 400 to 500 volunteers, from people to set up the tents to people that work on parking, security. So, the threshers alone was probably, you look at 40 threshers, 4 guys worth of crew, 160 guys there, and then we probably had another 200 to 300 on the grounds just getting stuff ready.
13.4 acres of winter wheat were bindered for the Old Tyme Harvest for Hunger, yielding about 65 bushels per acre. With a attendance of around 6,500 people, the support for this event probably exceeded the expectations of most. But a key to making it truly successful was finding the right charitable cause to support.
Ended up being the Canadian Foodgrains Bank. And what that is they actually endorse people delivering grain to the local elevator. And we thought if we were doing the harvest, we're working with grain, what a appropriate way to work with somebody, especially a group that's dealing with world hunger, and we're here to try and feed the world. It just seemed like a natural fit to work with Canadian Foodgrains Bank.
There were a number of benefits of working with the Canadian Foodgrains Bank, including that any contributions they receive are matched by the Canadian government on a 4-to-1 basis, up to an annual maximum of $25 million. As a longtime seed grower, Kaeding has experience with farm groups supporting the Foodgrains Bank.
That wanted to seed a project, wanted to seed a quarter section, two quarters down, and then they would just harvest the proceeds, deliver it to the elevator, tell them they were delivering it to Canadian Foodgrains Bank, and then there's some official paperwork that's filled out, and then they're given credit for that grain that's delivered.
As was mentioned earlier, the previous record for most threshing machines running at the same time was 29, set several years ago in Rock River, Wisconsin. That group has said they plan to go after the new record of 41, so there just may be another world record attempt here at Langenburg sometime down the road.
The people that were involved, a lot of young people especially, took a lot of time out of their busy lives. A lot of them were business people running businesses, and I think they all need to reevaluate their family time, the time that it took to put this on, and probably rest up, gain back about their 10, 12 nights of sleep that they've lost. And just see if the challenge is there to tackle it again. If Wisconsin does 50, we may have to do 60. We have room.
Sponsor support for the Old Tyme Harvest for Hunger was very strong, enabling them to work with an operating budget of about $300,000. At last count, the event had raised over $100,000 net to fight world hunger. Those attending the World Record Threshing Bee included visitors from as far away as Germany, India, and Australia.